There's another wonderful parable that we have today from the Gospel of Matthew. The question I think that we need to ask when we hear this parable, considering all the different characters, who do you focus your attention on? Probably the troublemaking tenants, right? That would be typical because I think for some odd reason, we want to know what's going to happen to the bad guy. And those tenants were obviously the bad guys. We're like that. Look at the news stories that draw our attention. The bad news. Newscasters make their living on telling us bad news. The sad thing is, whereas we focus so much on the bad news, the negative things that happen in life, how much more prevalent is the good news? I think back to my days of teaching, and it occurred to me as time went on how much time I would waste dealing with those few kids in the class who were troublemakers. And as I began to realize that I was wasting so much time, I started to see that there were so many more good students. And as I began to focus on them and pay attention more to them, the dynamic of the class began to change. The problem is, for us, that when we focus on the bad, the negative, and we transfer that to other aspects of our lives, and ultimately transfer that to God, thinking that God does the same, thinking that God is focusing on our bad behavior. And if he's focusing on our bad behavior, then God must be out to get us. And that causes us to mistrust God. What's he going to do to me? Because he's obviously seeing all the bad that I'm doing. I don't think that's true. Not so. Go back to the gospel and look at this parable again. Look at what the owner of the vineyard does. He builds a vineyard, puts a wall around it to protect it, digs a vat for the wine, creates an atmosphere where good wine can be produced, even builds a tower, again, for protection. And then he sends his servants, not once, not twice, but 3 times. And the 3rd time he sends his son. And he does so to collect really what is rightfully his to have. It's his vineyard. I think what we have to do is acknowledge what God has done for us. Not what he's taken away from us, but what he's given to us. And first and foremost, what God gives to us is his mercy. Mercy, getting more than we deserve, having an abundance. That's what God gives to us. And we have to think of it not like a giant eyedropper dispensing small quantities, leaving us on the brink of thirst. Rather, we have to see it as a gushing river, an ever-flowing fountain. And of course, the only thing that will cause us to die of thirst is our self-centered refusal to drink of the water of that fount. I think that's why the tenants, those wretched men, as the gospel said, would come to a wretched death because they refused what the owner of the vineyard had to offer. God's mercy is available to us. He so much wants to give it to each and every one of us, even to those who we think don't deserve it, even ourselves. And the only thing that's required is that in focusing on what God gives to us, we return to him at harvest time what is his due. That's all.